All right, so get ready because today we are going deep into the world of parapsychology,
Oh, wow.
specifically how it kind of intersects with psychiatry.
Okay.
And we got some really interesting material that you sent over.
Yeah.
And I'm particularly fascinated by this article that's exploring how mental health professionals are approaching these
Right.
like unconventional experiences, I guess we could say.
It is an interesting area,
Yeah.
where the seemingly inexplicable kind of bumps up against
Right.
our understanding of the mind.
Yeah.
Talking about those experiences that you just can't explain easily,
Right.
like telepathy, precognition, apparitions, and
Yeah.
it's more common than you think.
More common, really.
Yeah. But
Right.
think about it this way. Have you ever, felt this sudden wave of emotion,
Uh-huh.
like worry or unease,
Yeah.
seemingly out of the blue?
Yeah.
And then later you find out that a loved one was actually going through something
Oh,
difficult at that exact moment.
yeah. Actually, now that you mention it, I can think of a few times where that's happened.
So surveys suggest that like 10 to 15% of people report those kinds of experiences,
Wow.
like unexplained communication with someone they're emotionally close to,
Interesting.
often visual or auditory.
Hmm.
So these events might seem extraordinary.
Yeah.
They're not as rare as we might think.
Okay.
And that's where it gets really interesting in terms of psychiatry.
Yeah, because at first glance, some of these experiences could be mistaken for like mental health conditions.
Yeah, distinguishing between, say, a hallucination and an apparition
Right.
requires a nuanced understanding
Yeah.
of both the experience and the person's mental state.
So how do you make that distinction?
Yeah.
I mean, an apparition is that feeling of someone being present even though they aren't physically there, right?
Right.
Often a deceased loved one. How is that different from a hallucination?
I think the key is in the details.
Okay.
Apparitions often involve, independently verifiable events,
Uh-huh.
details that correspond to something that actually happened,
Okay.
whereas hallucinations, while vivid, they don't have that external connection.
So if someone sees an apparition of their grandmother and later finds out she passed away at that exact time,
Right.
that would be a strong indicator of an apparition, not a hallucination.
Exactly. And then you have cases of what are called veridical hallucinations,
Okay.
where someone experiences something that seems completely hallucinatory,
Yeah.
but it turns out to be true.
Okay.
For example, someone might hear a friend calling their name, only to find out later that friend was indeed trying to reach them at that moment, but through conventional means.
Oh, wow. Okay, now that really blurs the lines.
It does.
It seems like separating the paranormal from the psychological isn't always so clear-cut.
Right.
The article really dives into this with the example of telepathy, right?
Yes, and they use a fascinating case study to illustrate the complexity.
Okay.
It involved identical twin sisters,
Uh-huh.
separated by continents,
Wow.
one in Italy, the other in Philadelphia. The twin in Italy began experiencing these inexplicable intense pains.
Uh-huh.
And it turned out they coincided perfectly with her sister going into premature labor in Philadelphia.
Hold on, they were feeling their twins' labor pains from across the ocean.
Yeah,
That's wild, but neither of them knew about the pregnancy.
neither had any idea.
Oh, wow.
It raises so many questions
It does.
about how we understand communication, empathy, the nature of consciousness itself,
Yeah.
and it challenges us to consider whether what we call telepathy
Right.
might actually be a heightened form of empathy or sensitivity to another person's emotional state.
Which makes sense considering telepathy is often reported between family members or close friends.
Right.
People with strong emotional bonds. Is there any evidence suggesting it's linked to genetics?
Mm.
Being twins in this case.
While the twin connection is intriguing,
Yeah.
the research suggests it's more about that deep emotional connection than shared genes.
Okay.
These telepathic experiences are reported across various relationships: spouses, parents, and children, even close friends. What seems to matter most is the strength of the bond.
That's fascinating, but it also makes you think about the implications.
Yes.
Especially for mental health professionals. What if a therapist starts picking up on their patient's thoughts or feelings in a way that goes beyond traditional empathy?
That's a crucial question the article raises.
Yeah.
It highlights the need for therapists to be aware of these possibilities,
Right.
to understand the potential for what we might call psychic sensitivity,
Mm-hmm.
in the therapeutic relationship,
Yeah,
it certainly adds a whole new dimension
it does.
to the concept of boundaries and ethical practice.
Absolutely. And it speaks to how much we still don't know about the full potential of human connection and communication.
Right.
But speaking of experiences that seem to defy logic,
Yeah,
the article also touches on precognition, the ability to become aware of future events without any rational explanation, like a premonition.
exactly. And these precognitive experiences can be incredibly detailed and vivid,
Yeah.
sometimes involving specific sights, sounds, or even smells
Wow.
that later correspond to actual events. It's one thing to have a vague sense of foreboding, but quite another to see something happening before it unfolds in reality.
I imagine that could be pretty unsettling, especially if it's a negative event.
Yeah.
Is there any research on how these experiences impact people psychologically?
That's a great question, and one that researchers are still exploring.
Okay.
While precognitive experiences,
Uh-huh.
particularly those involving negative events, can be distressing in the short term,
Right.
studies suggest they're not inherently harmful. In fact, some researchers believe these experiences may serve a protective function,
How?
allowing individuals to prepare or cope differently.
So it's not a matter of knowing the future so much as having a glimpse of a potential future that you might be able to influence or navigate differently.
Precisely. It challenges our linear understanding of time
Right.
and suggests that our consciousness might be able to access information beyond the present moment. It certainly raises some thought-provoking questions about, how much control we truly have over our destinies.
Yeah.
But shifting gears a little bit, let's delve into a phenomenon that often gets sensationalized.
Okay. Poltergeists.
Ooh, okay, unexplained noises, objects moving on their own.
Right.
It's the stuff of classic ghost stories.
Yeah.
Is there any evidence to support the idea of poltergeists, or is it all just folklore and overactive imaginations?
It's interesting you mentioned overactive imaginations
Yeah.
because while the term poltergeist evokes images of mischievous spirits, you know,
Hmm.
the research actually points to a strong correlation between these experiences and heightened emotional states, particularly in adolescence.
So we're talking about teenagers and flying furniture.
Uh-huh.
I can see how that might be a tempting explanation for a parent dealing with teenage angst.
While it might seem like a convenient excuse,
Yeah.
there's a growing body of evidence suggesting that poltergeist activity tends to cluster around individuals.
Who are experiencing intense emotions like anger, stress, or even excitement.
Interesting.
And the activity often subsides when the individual receives emotional support or their environment changes.
Almost like the poltergeist activity is a manifestation of that emotional energy,
Right.
not some external entity.
That's one theory researchers are exploring.
Okay.
It suggests that our minds might have a more direct impact on the physical world than we currently understand.
Yeah.
And it challenges us to consider the possibility that what we perceive as paranormal
Right.
might actually be an extension of our own psychological processes.
That's a really interesting way to think about it, that maybe these experiences are more about untapped human potential than spooky spirits.
Yeah.
But the article also discusses near-death experiences, which seem to fall into a whole different category.
Absolutely. Near-death experiences, or NDEs, offer a unique window into the nature of consciousness and what might lie beyond our physical existence.
Yeah.
These experiences often involve a sense of detachment from the body, profound feelings of peace and connectedness,
Right.
and sometimes even encounters with deceased loved ones.
I've heard people describe these experiences as life-changing,
Yeah.
often leading to a decreased fear of death and a greater appreciation for life. Is there any scientific basis for those claims?
Interestingly, research on NDE suggests these positive after effects are remarkably consistent across cultures and backgrounds. People report increased spirituality, greater compassion and empathy,
Wow.
and a shift in priorities toward personal growth and meaningful relationships.
It's almost like these experiences offer a glimpse into a different realm of existence,
Right.
and that glimpse fundamentally changes their perspective on life. I imagine this poses some challenges for traditional psychiatry,
Yeah.
which has historically focused on the material world and the brain as the seat of consciousness.
You're right. It's a paradigm shift that psychiatry is still grappling with.
Yeah.
NDEs were once viewed as a potential symptom of mental illness, but now they're increasingly recognized as a distinct category of experience,
Yep.
worthy of study and consideration in their own right.
And it speaks to how our understanding of these phenomena evolves as
Right.
we gather more data and challenge our existing assumptions. Speaking of challenging assumptions,
Yeah.
the article also touches on reincarnation,
Uh-huh.
which has always captured my imagination.
Yeah.
The idea that we might live multiple lives carrying memories and experiences from one life to the next.
Right.
It's a concept that stretches the boundaries of what we think we know about life and death.
Reincarnation is certainly one of the most intriguing areas of parapsychology.
Yeah.
And while the concept is often associated with spiritual beliefs, there's a growing body of research examining cases where young children claim to remember past lives, often providing details that can be independently verified.
So we're not just talking about vague feelings or impressions, but
Right.
actual verifiable details about people, places, and events from a supposed past life.
Exactly. And some children even have birthmarks or physical characteristics that correspond to injuries or illnesses
Wow.
experienced by the person they claim to have been in a previous life.
That's pretty compelling, but how do you differentiate these cases from, say, a child simply having a vivid imagination
Right.
or being influenced by stories they've heard?
That's where the rigor of the research comes in.
Okay.
These cases are carefully investigated,
Uh-huh.
with researchers cross-checking details, interviewing witnesses, and examining any available evidence to rule out alternative explanations.
Right.
And in some cases, the level of detail and accuracy provided by the child is simply too compelling to dismiss.
So, while we might not have all the answers, these reincarnation cases suggest that consciousness might not be confined to a single lifetime. It's a concept that challenges our linear understanding of time and the nature of self. But taking a step back, we've covered a lot of ground here: telepathy, precognition, apparitions, poltergeists, near death experiences, reincarnation. It's clear that parapsychology delves into some pretty profound questions about the nature of reality and the human experience.
Absolutely. And I think what makes this field so fascinating
Yeah.
and potentially so valuable
Hmm.
is that it forces us to confront the limits of our current knowledge
Mm-hmm.
and to consider possibilities that lie beyond our conventional understanding.
So, what does all this mean for our listener? Someone who might be intrigued by these topics but isn't sure how to make sense of it all? What are the key takeaways from our deep dive into the world of parapsychology?
Yeah, it does feel like we've gone through like a whirlwind of mind-bending concepts.
It is a lot to take in.
It is. What are some of the key takeaways from all this? How
Hmm.
can understanding parapsychology actually be relevant to someone's life? You know?
Well, I think one of the most important takeaways is that these experiences, while often, shrouded in mystery and misconception, are more common than we might think.
And they can have a profound impact on people's lives,
Yeah.
often leading to personal growth, increased empathy,
Mm-hmm.
a deeper sense of connection to something greater than themselves.
That's a good point. It's not just about spooky stories or paranormal entertainment.
Right.
It's about recognizing that human experience encompasses a wide spectrum of possibilities,
Yes,
some of which challenge our current scientific models.
exactly.
But what about the connection to psychiatry?
Yeah.
The article seemed to emphasize that understanding parapsychology could actually change the way mental health professionals approach certain cases.
It could, and one of the key implications here is the need for greater awareness and sensitivity
Okay.
among mental health professionals.
Yeah.
It's crucial to be able to differentiate between, say, a genuine precognitive experience
Right.
and a delusional belief.
Yeah.
Misinterpreting these experiences could lead to misdiagnosis and inappropriate treatment.
So instead of dismissing someone's experience as simply a symptom of a mental health condition, a therapist who's informed about parapsychology might be able to explore the possibility that it's a genuine paranormal event,
Exactly.
which could lead to a more accurate understanding of the individual's overall mental and emotional state.
Yes. And beyond diagnosis, understanding parapsychology can also help therapists approach treatment
Okay.
in a more holistic and compassionate way.
Okay.
For example, if someone is struggling with the emotional impact of a near-death experience,
Uh-huh.
a therapist familiar with the common after effects of NDEs can provide more targeted support and guidance.
It's almost like expanding the toolbox for mental health professionals,
Yeah,
giving them a wider range of perspectives and approaches to draw from. And I imagine this goes beyond clinical settings as well.
it does.
It seems like understanding parapsychology could have implications for anyone,
I think so.
regardless of their profession or personal beliefs.
Absolutely. Parapsychology invites us to question our assumptions
Uh-huh.
about the nature of reality consciousness, the limits of human potential. It encourages us to explore the unknown with an open mind,
Yeah.
and to consider the possibility that there's much more to life than meets the eye.
And maybe in doing so, we can gain a deeper understanding not only of ourselves, but of the interconnectedness of all things.
Exactly.
It's a humbling and awe-inspiring thought, really.
It is, and it reminds us that we're all part of something much larger than ourselves.
Yeah,
I think that's a beautiful and empowering message to take away from this deep dive.
absolutely. And it leaves us with a sense of wonder and curiosity, which
Yeah.
is what the deep dive is all about.
That's right.
So for our listener who's been on this journey with us, what's a final thought you'd like to leave them with?
Okay.
Something to ponder as they continue exploring these fascinating topics.
Well, if we acknowledge that the human mind is capable of experiences that challenge our current scientific understanding,
Mm-hmm.
what does that tell us about the untapped potential of consciousness? What other possibilities might we be overlooking or dismissing, simply because they don't fit neatly into our existing frameworks?
That's a great question to leave our listener with.
Yeah,
It reminds us that the journey of exploration and discovery is never ending.
indeed. And I encourage everyone to keep exploring, to keep asking questions,
Yeah.
and to remain open to the wonders that lie beyond the boundaries of what we think we know.
Wise words. Well, that wraps up our deep dive into the world of parapsychology. We've only scratched the surface,
We have.
but hopefully it sparked some curiosity and inspired you to continue exploring these fascinating topics. Thanks for joining us.